Welcome to Scent of Salvation, a werewolf fated mate romance, where fate is messy, the sparks are wild, and the full moon brings more than fur and fangs. There's snark, steam, and a mate, bond neither of them asked for, but can't escape. Buckle up, pack. From haunted hearts to ancient curses, you'll find stories here that pull you in and don't let go. If you're into tales that twist the real and the unreal, you're in the right place. TM Nyxen Audiobooks. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. The highway to Silent Crest should have offered solace, a ribbon of asphalt unspooling through the quiet countryside. Instead, the sky churned like a bruised plum, heavy with a malevolence that pressed down on them. Dominic leaned forward, his brow furrowed. That's not just a bad sky. That's an end of days sky. Tell me you see that, Harlan Blackwood didn't immediately respond. His hands, large and calloused, were clenched tightly around the steering wheel of the black SUV. The radio spat static, a sharp beep piercing the mounting tension before a disembodied voice cut through. Tornado warnings now active in 4 counties, including a low growl rumbled from the back, vibrating through the vehicle like a predator's purr. Reese, a mountain of muscle barely contained by his seat, ran a hand through his close-cropped hair. I knew we should have stayed in the damn city overnight. Hotel, whiskey, room service. What are we doing chasing clouds into the ass end of nowhere? Marcus, lean and sharp-eyed, snorted from beside him. Because Harlan doesn't sleep in places with doormen. You know that. Shut up, Harlan muttered, the words clipped and dangerous. The ripple of obedience was instantaneous. When Harlan Blackwood used that tone, it wasn't a request, it was law. The Alpha was giving an order. A new scent slammed into him, a jarring chord amidst the familiar smells of leather, engine oil, and male sweat. Metallic, ion-charged, wrong. He inhaled slowly, carefully, dissecting the complex aroma. Beneath the sharp tang of ozone lurked something else, something ancient, something wild, something that stirred the sleeping wolf within him. Get ready, Harlan said, his voice low and edged with warning. This isn't just weather. It's something else. Dominic twisted in his seat, eyes narrowed, suddenly alert. You smell it? Harlan nodded once, a curt, economical movement, like blood and ozone. The wind howled outside, no, shrieked, a banshee wail that rattled the teeth. The SUV shuddered violently, as if struck by a physical blow. Hell no, Reese muttered, his eyes wide. Tell me that wasn't the wind screaming. Then came the sirens, first distant whispers carried on the wind, then a deafening, ear-splitting crescendo. Take shelter immediately, Tornado confirmed. I repeat, the radio blared, swallowed by static. There, Dominic yelled, his voice tight with urgency. He pointed to a dilapidated gas station half shrouded in a curtain of overgrown vines and lurking shadows off the next exit. Harlan wrenched the wheel, the SUV fishtailing wildly, spitting gravel behind them like a hail of bullets. They skidded into the gas station's cracked parking lot, tires screaming in protest. All 4 men piled out, moving with a speed and practiced efficiency born of years working together. They moved like a single, coordinated unit. The sky cracked open, unleashing its fury. They barely made it inside the gas station before the storm unleashed its full wrath. Debris began flying, propelled by the gale-force winds. Windows shattered in a shower of glass. The building groaned and shuddered, as if fighting a losing battle against a monstrous force. Bathroom! Back corner! Harlan barked, already throwing himself towards the back of the store, his immense shoulders slamming the flimsy door inward. The metal frame buckled and splintered. They huddled together in the cramped space. The walls rattled around them, plaster dust raining down. The weak overhead light flickered erratically, then died, plunging them into near darkness. Reese cursed as a chunk of the ceiling came down, grazing his arm and sending a stinging rain of dust down his neck. Then the full force of the tornado hit. The sound was like the world being ripped in two, a cacophony of howling wind, splintering wood, and grinding metal. The walls screamed in protest. The concrete floor vibrated violently. Something huge, possibly the roof, ripped away with a sound like tearing paper. A blinding storm of dust, shattered glass, and freezing rain exploded around them. Harlan shoved the others backward, shielding them from the chaos, his arms outstretched, bracing the crumbling walls with a strength that seemed impossible, a sheer force of will holding back the storm. Dominic saw it first, a flicker of something primal in the dim light. Harlan's eyes had shifted, shining a bright, burning amber color, a predatory glow that had nothing to do with humanity. "Harlan, your eyes," Dominic started, his voice barely audible above the roar. "I know," Harlan replied, his voice a low growl that resonated deep within Dominic's chest. No one questioned it. Now was not the time. The next minute felt like an eternity, a blur of noise, fear, and the unwavering strength of their alpha. Then, silence. When they emerged, coughing and blinking against the strange, subdued gray light, the world had been irrevocably changed. Silent Crest was gone. What had once been familiar buildings, bustling stores, and welcoming homes were now just unrecognizable shapes buried beneath a mountain of debris. The air stank of soaked earth, shattered timber, and the acrid tang of destruction. Dominic's phone buzzed weakly in his pocket, stuttering like it had just clawed its way out of a grave. He pulled it out, thumbing the screen. "It's Marla. She says the compound's hit bad." But the pack, most of them made it. A wave of relief, fleeting and ephemeral, washed over him. Then Harlan froze. He turned slowly, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to something far beyond the range of human hearing. His nostrils flared, sampling the air. "What is it?" Reese asked, his voice low and wary. Harlan didn't answer. He took one step forward, then another, his movements deliberate and purposeful. The others followed, their instincts screaming danger even as they obeyed their alpha's silent command. A breeze stirred across the ruined street, carrying a scent that cut through the overwhelming stench of ash and decay. It was a human scent, and it ignited something deep in Harlan's chest, a primal spark of protectiveness that flared into a burning need and urgency. "That's not Pack," Marcus said, his voice tight. Harlan's voice was low, almost reverent. "No, but whoever it is, they are alive." They rounded a broken fence and found what had once been a house, now little more than a jumbled mess of splinters and stone. But beneath the rubble, faint, almost imperceptible, was a sign of life, a heartbeat. Harlan's amber eyes flared again, blazing with an intensity that sent a shiver down Dominic's spine. A complex cocktail of scents flooded his senses. Honeysuckle, rain, soaked earth, and something ancient. Something he couldn't quite place. Something that stopped the wolf within him mid-stride, filling him with a confusion and a burgeoning alarm. "Someone's alive under there," he said, his voice edged with something primal, something hungry. He dropped to his knees, his fingers digging into the loose debris. Then, a sound. Distant, muffled, but unmistakable. Cries. "Find her," Harlan growled, the command ripping from his throat. Smoke clung to the ruins like a second storm cloud, a greasy shroud over the landscape. The ground beneath Harlan's boots was slick with mud, ash, and God knew what else, a noxious cocktail that burned in his nostrils. All around him, the skeletons of homes groaned like they remembered what they'd once been, a chorus of mournful sighs carried on the wind. The air tasted like death and despair. This one had been a two-story colonial with blue shutters, cheerful once, a haven. Now it was just a splintered grave, a mangled monument to unimaginable loss. The bright blue of the shutters was now a faded, bruised hue, barely clinging to warped frames. Dominic crouched nearby, pushing away a chunk of drywall that crumbled to dust in his gloved hands. "There's nothing over here, Har. No movement. You sure it was real?" His voice was tight with exhaustion, each word edged with the grim reality of their search. Harlan didn't answer. He was already down on one knee beside what remained of the front porch, his black jeans stained with grime, inhaling deep, steady breaths, his senses strained, reaching, desperate. There it was again, not just a scent of presence, a spark of life stubbornly flickering in the face of oblivion. Honeysuckle, sweet and clean, battling the acrid tang of burning wood. Rain on hot stone, a primal, grounding aroma that conjured images of ancient forests and untamed power. And underneath it, something wild, something old. His wolf paced just under the surface, restless, ears forward, its hackles raised in anticipation. A low growl rumbled in Harlan's chest, a sound he fiercely suppressed. Harlan's voice was a low growl, barely audible above the din. "She's under here, still alive." "Jesus," Reese muttered behind him, brushing dust from his jacket with a weary swipe. "What is she, Wolverine? How the hell did she survive that?" He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, his face etched with fatigue and disbelief. Marcus, grim as always, tossed another charred plank aside with a grunt, the muscle in his jaw twitching. Only one way to find out. His movements were economical, efficient, honed by years of experience in the face of disaster. Emergency workers had begun to arrive. Flashing lights sliced through the gloom. Half-charged radios crackled with static, and a cacophony of shouting mingled with the whine of distant sirens. They moved with the practiced urgency of people used to chaos, a well-oiled machine trying to process too much information at once, but completely overwhelmed by its size and savagery. "We've got trapped survivors on 5th, 7th, and here. Resources are thin. Any volunteers with medical training or experience in extrication?" The fire captain barked, his voice hoarse, his face streaked with soot. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform torn, but his authority remained unwavering. "There!" Dominic pointed to a dilapidated gas station half-shrouded in vines and shadow off the next exit. Dominic didn't wait for a formal invite, already ripping off his gloves. "We'll help here." "Damn right we will," Harlan growled, his voice raw with urgency. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce need to get to her, to pull her from the jaws of death. Pack members began to arrive one by one, drawn by the Alpha's call, each drawn from their lives and their duties by a primal compulsion. No one questioned it, not yet. They moved with purpose, their faces grim, their eyes scanning the devastation, ready to follow their leader. Within minutes, Harlan had a perimeter cleared, and bodies working, a coordinated effort amidst the surrounding chaos. He directed them with curt commands, his focus laser sharp, his every instinct screaming at him to move faster. Then, he heard her voice, faint, cracked, and frightened. A fragile thread of sound reaching out from the abyss. "Hello? Is someone there?" Matilda's voice barely carried above the crackle of the flames and the groan of collapsing structures. It was a whisper of desperation, a plea for salvation. The pack froze, every muscle tense, every breath held captive. Even the emergency workers stilled, momentarily silenced by the raw vulnerability in that single trembling question. Harlan stepped closer to the crumbled mass of wood and concrete, his heart hammering against his ribs. There was a thin opening, just wide enough to make out a sliver of the dark beneath, a glimpse into her prison. He crouched low, one hand pressed against the earth, grounding himself, centering his energy. His senses heightened, attuned to the faintest sound, the slightest shift in the rubble. "We hear you. You're safe. What's your name?" Harlan's voice was low and steady, a calming balm in the storm. He needed to reassure her, to give her hope, to let her know that she wasn't alone. Matilda Jensen." Her voice was barely audible, a fragmented whisper carried on the wind. "Hi, Matilda. I'm Harlan," his voice low and steady. But that scent hit him again, full force, washing over him in a tidal wave of sensation. It was stronger now, no longer tangled with smoke and ash. The honeysuckle clung to his lungs, wrapped around something deeper, something more profound. Like petrichor in memory, the scent of rain on ancient stone, and the echo of forgotten lives. Like something ancient that had no place in a human body. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and utterly alien. His fingers curled into fists, digging into the muddy earth. His wolf clawed at the inside of his skin, desperate to break free, to claim what it instinctively recognized. A guttural growl escaped his throat, a sound he couldn't contain. Dominic, watching him too closely, raised a brow, his expression a mixture of concern and suspicion. "You all right, Har?" No. He was not all right. Every cell in his body was screaming, demanding action. He felt a pull, a connection to the woman trapped beneath the rubble that defied all logic. She's pinned! We need eyes under the rubble, the emergency medic shouted, his voice tight with urgency. He was a young man, barely out of his 20s, but his face was already etched with the trauma of the day. A volunteer engineer, mid-40s, clearly exhausted, his face a mask of grim determination, crawled into view, flashlight clipped to his belt. He shone the beam of light through the opening, illuminating a chaotic jumble of wood and concrete. There's a beam pinning both legs. If we lift it wrong, we risk internal bleeding. She's got maybe 3 feet of clearance and 0 stability. Honestly, it could take days. We'd have to brace every piece around her, inch by inch. The engineer shook his head, his voice laced with resignation. It's a delicate operation. Harlan stood, jaw tight, his muscles coiled like a spring. Days? She didn't have days. Every second counted. Every breath she took was a victory against the odds. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. We could lift it. The engineer gave a humorless laugh until he met Harlan's eyes and stopped cold, his smile fading. Harlan didn't blink. His gaze was unwavering, intense, burning with a primal need. Didn't need to. His power radiated from him in waves. An unspoken challenge. A silent promise to do whatever it took to save the woman trapped beneath the rubble. Reese, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, added dryly, "He means with us." The engineer glanced at the assembled pack members, their faces grim, their bodies radiating strength. He swallowed hard, realizing that these volunteers were very serious, and he wasn't quite sure at this point how unstable the area was or what to make of the group before him. I don't know where to begin, he stated honestly. A pack tent was set up nearby, a makeshift command post in the chaos. Still, Harlan didn't step more than 20 feet from the rubble, his presence a silent sentinel. That wasn't lost on anyone. The other pack members watched him with a mixture of concern and intrigue. He hasn't even let Marcus take over. Lucas, a young pack member, murmured in a low voice. When's the last time Harlan didn't delegate? He's pacing like a caged wolf. Davin, another pack member, added, his eyes fixed on Harlan's restless movements. Did you see the way he looked at the rubble? Like it was his responsibility. Dominic finally snapped, his patience worn thin. He found Harlan alone, standing like a stone statue as the sun dipped behind bruised clouds, painting the sky in shades of gray and purple. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the weight of unspoken anxieties. Dominic stepped up to him, his voice firm. All right, talk to me, Harlan. Harlan didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the wreckage. About, Dominic sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired face. Don't start. You're acting like you've been hexed. You haven't eaten, you haven't shifted since we got here, and you're staring at that rubble like it's got your soul under it. Silence stretched between them, heavy and tense, broken only by the distant sounds of the rescue operation. Then, Harlan spoke quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with a raw emotion that Dominic had rarely heard from him. Her scent, it's doing something to me. I can't leave Dom. Dominic's face twisted in something between confusion and alarm, his eyes searching Harlan's for answers. You don't think she could be your... Harlan cut him off, his voice sharp, dangerous. Impossible, she's human. The words dropped between them like a verdict, heavy with denial. But even as Harlan said them, his gaze drifted back toward the collapsed house, drawn by an invisible force. Then from the shadows beneath, a soft voice called again. Is someone still there? Matilda's voice was fainter now, weaker, barely a whisper in the gathering darkness. Floodlights hummed overhead, casting a harsh white glow into the wreckage. The night had settled in thick, pressing against the edges of the rescue site like a held breath. Crickets didn't dare sing. Not here, not yet. Generators coughed and rumbled, their mechanical voices a morbid counterpoint to the silence of the dead. Men in reflective vests moved like ghosts through a graveyard of walls that no longer stood, their flashlights dancing across the debris like lost souls. Harlan hadn't moved more than 5 feet from the rubble all night. His shadow stretched long, and still across the wreckage, a dark sentinel guarding a secret the Earth refused to release. The others came and went, shifting debris, coordinating triage, their faces etched with exhaustion and grim determination. He stayed, standing rigid to the spot by something far stronger than duty. The voice in the rubble spoke again, soft and ragged, barely audible above the mechanical drone of the generators. "Still there, Harlan?" Matilda asked, her voice a fragile thread in the darkness. "Still here," Harlan replied, the words a low rumble in his chest. A beat of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears and uncertainties. "Are you always this talkative, or am I just lucky?" Matilda's voice held a flicker of wry humor, a spark of defiance against the encroaching despair. He huffed, half laughing, half exhaling, the sound laced with a weary tenderness. "You're awake. That's what matters." "Hard to sleep when your legs are a matching pair of paperweights," she retorted, a small, courageous jest. "You're doing well," he said gently, crouching lower to the narrow crack where her voice came through. The cold night air bit at his exposed skin, but he barely noticed. The scent of honeysuckle and rain hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened, clinging to the air around him like a memory. It curled around him now like a question, a whisper of life in the face of death. His wolf was pacing, restless, alert. Too alert, its primal instincts were screaming, demanding action, protection. "Can I ask something without you thinking I'm crazy?" Matilda wondered, her voice laced with hesitant vulnerability. Harlan arched a brow toward a wall of shattered stone, though she couldn't see him. "Matilda, there's nothing you could ask that would make me think that. You're safe with me, crazy included." Pause. The silence thrummed with untold stories, with lives irrevocably altered. "Do you believe people can feel when something bad is coming? Before it happens?" The question hung in the air, fragile and raw. His jaw tensed, the muscles working beneath his skin. He knew that feeling all too well. "Yeah, I believe that. I did. This morning. Woke up feeling like the earth was holding its breath, like everything was about to change." There was a tremor in her voice, a hint of the terror she must have felt. She paused again. He could hear her swallow, slow and forced, the sound amplified by the suffocating silence around them. "I'm a botanist. Plants usually don't give me existential dread. But today," her voice trailed off, lost in the memory of that premonition. He leaned forward, voice softer, coaxing. "Botanist, huh?" "Yeah. Came back to take care of my parents when Mom got sick. Figured I'd stay a while. Help with the garden, drive them to appointments, pretend I wasn't quietly losing my mind back in Chicago." She spoke with a fragile strength, a hint of the life she'd carved out for herself. "You grow things." Harlan tried to picture her, hands in the soil, coaxing life from the earth. Try to. Her laugh was quiet, dry, devoid of mirth. Not many flowers survive an F4 tornado. He closed his eyes for a moment, the image of vibrant blooms crushed beneath tons of rubble searing his mind. The quiet ache in her voice felt like it had hands, tugging gently at his ribs, a reminder of the lives torn apart, the futures stolen. "We're still looking for your family. And your neighbors," Harlan said, the words measured and deliberate. It wasn't a lie if you whispered it like a prayer, if you imbued it with all the hope you could muster. But he already knew. The reports were clear. Nothing left above ground except splinters. No survivors, but her. Still, he couldn't tell her that. Not yet. He couldn't extinguish the last ember of hope in the darkness. Her voice softened, tinged with a bittersweet nostalgia. "Dad used to teach me plants by scent. Said if you couldn't remember the Latin name, the smell would never lie to you." That caught him off guard. He smiled faintly, a genuine warmth spreading through him despite the bleakness of the situation. "Smart man. My people identify everything by smell too." "Oh? So you're also a weird nose-based savant?" Her voice was lighter now, infused with a playful curiosity. He couldn't help but think of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "You could say that." Then, panic. The fragile calm was shattered. He heard the shift in her breath before her words caught up. A desperate, gasping sound. A stuttering inhale, and there was a sharp, quaking tremble in her voice. It's getting tighter in here. I know it's not, but it feels like the walls are pressing in. I can't. God, I can't move. I can't. Her voice spiraled upwards, a frantic plea for escape. Immediately, Harlan's training kicked in, his voice firm and steady, a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. Breathe with me, Matilda. Listen to my voice. I can't. I can't. You can. I've got you. You're not alone. He repeated the words like a mantra, a promise he intended to keep. Her breathing was ragged, shallow gasps that tore at his lungs. His wolf was growling now, pacing hard in his skin, furious at the helplessness, the fear, the trap. They were both trapped, in different ways, bound together by the shared experience of trauma. Easy now, he murmured, low and steady. That's it. Breathe with me. In through your nose, slow and steady. 1, 2, 3. His voice was a tether, wrapping around her panic and gently pulling it back. She followed. Barely, but enough. Now, out through your mouth. Let it go. 1, 2, 3, 4. He stretched the exhale, voice soft but unyielding, like he could will the storm out of her one breath at a time. The air between them began to settle, breath by breath, the frantic energy bleeding out into the silence. His hand pressed flat against the rubble without thinking, like he could reach her pulse through the stone, as if just knowing she was still breathing might steady his own heart. Finally she spoke, faint and trembling, but laced with gratitude. Thank you, Harlan. He didn't answer, couldn't. His voice had deserted him, choked by the intensity of his emotions. His claws were too close to the surface, the primal urge to protect burning within him. The moon had climbed high, a sickle blade in a starless sky, casting long, skeletal shadows across the ravaged landscape. Most of the rescue crew had rotated out for rest, their faces etched with exhaustion and the weight of what they'd witnessed. Matilda spoke again, her voice worn and small, the voice of someone who's enduring and struggling quietly. Why do you stay when others take breaks? Don't you have family worried about you? Harlan exhaled, long and quietly, the sound lost in the night air. What did she imagine when she thought of him? My family's different. I'm responsible for them, not the other way around. He could feel the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders, a burden he carried willingly. Silence. The only sound was the distant hum of the generators, a constant reminder of the devastation that swallowed them. Then, you sound lonely, even though you're surrounded by people, Matilda whispered, her voice barely audible. His breath caught in his throat, a sharp intake of air that echoed the sudden stillness within him. She couldn't see him. She couldn't see the darkness that clung to him, the weight of his past, the loneliness that had become his constant companion. But somehow, she'd seen him, pierced through the layers of armor he'd built around himself, and glimpsed the vulnerable soul beneath. He had no response, not a single damn word. The revelation had struck him dumb, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. So he just sat there, his hand pressed against the cold stone, his heart pounding in his chest, and listened to the sound of her breathing in the dark, the rhythm of her life, a fragile melody in the desolate landscape. The hour between midnight and dawn always feels borrowed, stolen from the rest of the world. It was during that time that the rescue site went quiet. Not still, because there was always movement, but quieter. A skeleton crew moved through the floodlights with weary precision. Voices were hushed and faces drawn, and Harlan was still at the edge of the rubble, refusing to move, not leaving her side. Rain pattered against his jacket, as if trying to wear him down. It wouldn't, though. He had made a solemn promise to himself. Dominic approached again, arms crossed, face grim. You're not made of stone. You need sleep, Harlan. Harlan's response was short and to the point. I can't, Dom. Dominic corrected his statement. Or won't. You're not helping her by grinding yourself into the ground. Harlan didn't look at him, his eyes locked on the cracked concrete, on the point where her voice had come through hours ago. I feel her. Every time she stirs, every time her breath stumbles, I feel it, like a wire strung through my chest. Dominic's lips parted, as if to argue. Then he saw the look in Harlan's eyes and wisely let it go. Fine, but you go down, and I'm hauling your stubborn ass out of here. He left without waiting for a reply. Harlan stayed, and the rain kept coming. Hours blurred together, and still her voice, faint and thinner than before. Still there? Matilda asked, her voice barely audible. Always, Harlan replied. Good. I dreamed you left, and I couldn't breathe, Matilda said, her words slurred. Something in his chest clenched. It wasn't human. Or maybe it was too human, he couldn't tell anymore. Her scent was sharper in the damp air honeysuckle and heartbreak, and it hit him harder with every drop of rain. He closed his eyes, letting the night pull him back. Dreams broke through his closed eyes. Blood on the training floor. His. And others. The old alpha's roar still echoed through his skull. You want to lead them? Earn it. No mercy. No shortcuts. Just fight after fight, betrayal, loss, bone, and blood, until he stood on a hill of his own mistakes and had no one beside him. Harlan had learned early on that leadership was a crown of thorns, worn alone. And yet, somehow, with her voice in the dark, he didn't feel quite alone, Matilda stirred. He caught the ragged edge of her next breath. Sorry. Might drift off soon, she mumbled. No. Talk to me about anything. Something, Harlan urged. He didn't care what. He just needed her words, like oxygen. I was engaged. He left when I came back here. Said he admired my loyalty, but couldn't build a future in a place full of ghosts. After a pause, Matilda revealed. Idiot, Harlan spat out. She gave a soft, broken laugh. I thought so too. But maybe he was right. Maybe I don't belong anywhere anymore. You belong exactly where you are, Harlan said, his voice firm. There was a pause before she spoke, and what she said made his pulse skip. Your voice, it tightens when you lie. His mouth parted. What? Like, now? When you said always earlier, you meant it, but something about it hurt you, Matilda explained, her words surprisingly clear. He was stunned. She couldn't see him, but she read him like scripture. His wolf growled low, not at her, but at the way her words touched something in him no one else ever had. Not his pack, not anyone. The rain picked up, heavier now. One of the engineers jogged over, shouting through the storm. We need to cover this or we're gonna lose structural integrity. Water's already compromising the supports. Harlan turned without hesitation. Get me tarps. Secure them. Double layer everything above her chamber. But the rest? Then triage, he snapped. Her safety comes first. They scrambled, and not one person questioned him. Not anymore. Back under the tinted tarp, soaked to the bone, he settled in against the edge of the rubble again. You still with me? Harlan asked. Barely. But you've got good timing, Matilda replied. Can't let you sleep yet. You snore. I'll walk away, he teased lightly. A soft chuckle. Deal. Their voices dropped into that strange, sacred stillness only rainstorms and midnight confessions allow. Have you ever wondered if we were meant for something else? Not something grand, just something that feels right? Every day, Harlan said. You don't sound surprised, she questioned. I lead people who carry the weight of bloodlines and secrets. I can't afford to be surprised, Harlan explained. A pause hung in the air. That sounds exhausting, Matilda observed. It is, Harlan agreed. Another silence settled between them. You talk like someone who's always protecting everyone. But who protects you? Matilda asked cautiously. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The words lodged somewhere between his chest and his throat, too tangled with memories, with years of silence and self-sacrifice. No one ever had. And admitting that felt too close to breaking. And then, dawn. A pale thread of light bled into the storm clouds. Somewhere, a bird called out, one solitary voice in the quiet. Your voice got me through the night. I don't even know your face, but I trust you more than people I've known for years, Matilda said softly, her voice sounding weaker. Harlan pressed his hand flat to the rubble. It was just stone, just space. And yet, Matilda's words ignited something inside of him. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not leaving you, Matilda. Not now, not ever. He meant to reassure her. Just words. That's all it was supposed to be. But the moment they left his mouth, something shifted. His wolf still then went quiet in that bone-deep, undeniable way. And Harlan knew. He hadn't just spoken. He'd claimed her. Not with intention, not with thought, but instinct. He and his wolf had recognized her as theirs. The rain hadn't stopped. It had morphed from a steady patter into a ceaseless, sucking deluge that turned soil into sludge and optimism into something brittle and damp. The rescue workers moved like ghosts through the mire, boots squelching in mud that tried to steal them with every step. Machinery was covered, tarps strained and sagged under the weight of the water. The beams they had delicately positioned yesterday groaned with the shifting pressure, and beneath it all, Harlan could feel the earth turning against them. Then came the scream. Ah! Oh God! Matilda's cry was raw, unfiltered, torn straight from the gut, a sound of pure agony that sliced through the relentless drumming of the rain. Harlan was already at the rubble wall before his brain caught up to his body. Matilda, talk to me, he demanded, his voice tight with a fear he hadn't felt in decades. Her breath came in shallow gasps, panic creeping in around the edges. Something shifted. My leg. Oh God. I think it reopened. Then came the scent, a gut-wrenching wave that crashed over Harlan with the force of the storm itself, and the second scream, hoarse and weak, followed. Her blood. The first trace of it was sharp, copper, and pain, a metallic tang that made his stomach clench. But beneath that, the rest of her scent changed, deepened, like fire stirred into honeysuckle. Like wild rain over ancient roots. Something old. Something sacred. Harlan staggered back a step, jaw clenched so tight it ached. His pupils shrank to pinpricks, then flared wide again, reflecting the chaos of the scene. A low growl crawled up his throat, a primal sound that threatened to tear free. His hands trembled. Not from fear, from the ache of change. Claws slid halfway from his fingers before he forced them back with a grunt of sheer will. His teeth lengthened, then retracted, the bone-deep urge to shift almost overwhelming. Sweat poured down his spine even as the rain drenched him, a chilling counterpoint to the inferno raging within. Dominic was suddenly there, catching his shoulder, his grip firm but not aggressive. Go. Now. Get control, he ordered, his voice low and urgent, barely audible above the storm. She's hurt, Harlan growled, his focus entirely on the injured woman trapped beneath the rubble. And if she sees you shift through a concrete crack, that'll be her last conscious thought before she passes out. Dominic countered, his words blunt but necessary. A cold dose of reality amidst the rising tide of Harlan's primal instincts. He didn't argue, just turned and stalked toward the edge of the site, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white, breathing hard each inhale a ragged struggle against the rising tide of the wolf within. A tree. He needed a tree to punch, or a mountain to throw. Behind him, Dominic crouched near the rubble, his expression softening as he spoke. Matilda, I'm here. Harlan just had to step away for a second. Is he okay? He sounded strange, like he was in pain too, Matilda asked, her voice weak and laced with genuine concern. Dominic paused, taken off guard by the genuine worry in her voice, his gaze softening. He's been through worse, but he's not used to someone like you. Like me? I'm just a mess of broken bones and bad timing, Matilda replied, a faint smile flickering across her pale face. Exactly, Dominic said gently, letting a hint of warmth into his voice. He gave her a moment to chuckle before continuing softly. Hang in there. He'll be back. Harlan stood under the trees just outside the floodlight's reach, head tipped to the sky like he was daring the storm to wash him away, a solitary figure battling the raging tempest within. The wolf inside him was clawing at the edges, not just for blood, but for her. Her scent had etched itself into him, twining through every instinct he'd spent years honing into control. He wasn't just drawn to her now, he was tethered, and it scared the hell out of him. But then, Harlan? Matilda's voice, cracked and barely audible, floated out, fragile as a butterfly caught in the storm. His wolf stilled. He was back at the rubble in seconds, kneeling beside the gap. "I'm here," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "Can you help me? It's bleeding more now. I can feel it running into my boot," Matilda pleaded, her voice shaking. "All right, listen to me. You've got some supplies near you, right? The emergency bag they lowered yesterday?" Harlan asked, trying to project calm despite the turmoil raging inside him. "I think so, yeah. I can feel something near my elbow," Matilda replied, her voice strained. "There's a dressing roll and antiseptic. Can you reach it?" Harlan asked, guiding her with his words. He talked her through each step, voice steady even as every one of her pain noises stabbed him deeper, a physical ache that resonated with the pain of holding back. "Good. Now press the gauze there. Not too hard, you don't want to move the bone. Just hold," he instructed, his voice a lifeline in the claustrophobic darkness. "You really know your field medicine," Matilda managed, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Let's just say I've been around my share of injuries," Harlan replied, a hint of a grim smile playing on his lips. Her laugh was breathless, but real, a spark of defiance against the encroaching darkness. They settled again. The rain kept falling, quieter now, but relentless, a constant reminder of the fragility of their situation. "Did I tell you we moved to Silent Crest when I was 7? Matilda asked, her voice drifting. That caught his attention. "No, we lived up by that old orchard, near the cliffs. My dad said the air there smelled like belonging," Matilda revealed. Something clicked in Harlan's brain. That was old pack territory, long vacated after a border skirmish years ago. "I know that place," he said softly, his voice tinged with a strange mixture of recognition and regret. "My mom used to say strange things bloomed up there, plants that shouldn't. We used to joke that the woods were haunted," Matilda recounted. Harlan didn't laugh, because they were, and somehow, this woman had grown up in the shadows of his world without ever knowing it. Or maybe she had known something, just not what it meant. He turned from the rubble, motioning to Reese and Marcus, who had just arrived from another dig site. "We move faster. I don't care what it takes. She doesn't have hours," Harlan commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Dominic appeared at his side, voice low but sharp. "You're risking exposure. What if someone sees Marcus bench pressing a car, or one of the medics heals in front of her? Then we deal with it. After. Right now, we move." Harlan snapped, his eyes flashing. There was steel in his voice now, the kind that made even alphas flinch. Dominic sighed. "You're not thinking straight," he accused. "No, I'm not," Harlan snapped. "I'm feeling everything, and right now, I feel her slipping." Just then, her voice drifted up again, faint, fractured. "Harlan?" He was beside the rubble before the second syllable. "I'm here," he reassured. "It hurts, worse than before. I need something. Something good to focus on," Matilda whispered, her voice barely audible. Emotion clenched in his chest. He swallowed hard, jaw tight, eyes lifting to the breaking sky as if searching for strength there, then dropped back to the narrow crevice where her voice barely reached him. He pressed his hand to the stone, a silent promise. "Okay, Matilda, I'll give you something good," he murmured. He closed his eyes, focusing all his energy, all his control. Imagine a field, late summer, warm sun, tall grass. You're lying in it barefoot. There's a breeze carrying honeysuckle, and you're not alone. "I'm there," he said, painting a picture of peace and serenity amid chaos. Silence. "Then that does sound good," Matilda whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Her voice faded again, but slower this time, the image of the field offering a temporary respite from the pain. And Harlan stayed right there, whispering stories of warmth and green things and blue skies until her breathing evened out again, his voice a soothing balm against the storm. Even if the rain never stopped, Dominic kept his distance, sensing the weight pressing on his alpha. "You're risking a lot for her," he said carefully. "I'm not questioning you, Harlan. I'm just trying to understand." Harlan turned, fire blazing behind his eyes. "I feel her slipping, Dom, and that's all you need to understand. The hum of heavy equipment rumbled like thunder against the crack. The afternoon light was gray and unforgiving, filtered through smoke, clouds, and the ghosts of what Silent Crest had been. A new access shaft had finally been cleared, but it wasn't wide enough. Not yet. Not for rescue, just for reaching her. Through it, pack members, disguised as volunteer EMTs, lowered a small pouch containing a filtered water bottle, a protein gel, and a folded note scribbled in Harlan's clean, blocky handwriting. Harlan, writing, "Sip slowly. Rest between sips. Talk to me when you can." Matilda's fingers found it after a few blind swipes. The rasp of plastic and the quiet "thank God" that followed made Harlan's shoulders relax for the first time in hours. Later, when she'd gotten the strength to talk again, he was there. Always there. "Still here, huh?" Matilda's voice was tired, soft, barely a breath. "You're either the most stubborn man alive or secretly unemployed." A half smile touched Harlan's lips, despite the grimness of the situation. "Both. The first one just doesn't pay well." She laughed, weak but warm, a sound that eased the knot in his chest, for a moment at least. "Tell me something about you." "Only if you go first." Harlan countered, his voice a low rumble that he hoped was reassuring. "Deal?" My dad was a botanist. Couldn't pass a wildflower without sharing its Latin name and telling us how indigenous tribes used it. My mom was a high school English teacher. Loved stories, especially ones with tragic endings. Said they were honest. Sounds like they balanced each other," Harlan observed, imagining the couple. He felt a pang of something akin to envy. That kind of simple, beautiful life was something he'd never had, and maybe never could. "Yeah." Matilda's voice held a fragile smile. He saw the world in roots and leaves. She saw it in metaphors. Her voice wavered for just a second. Harlan could almost hear her heart hitch. "They were everything. I came back here to care for them. I thought I had time." Damn it, Harlan thought. Every word out of her mouth was another knife he couldn't dodge. He hadn't told her, couldn't yet, that no other survivors had been found in the remains of her neighborhood. That her parents were most likely, he couldn't bring himself to tell her the news. It was all too much. So instead, he asked, "Did you have any family traditions?" And just like that, her voice lifted again, a fragile flower reaching for the light. "Sunday pancakes. Dad used to burn the first one every time, like a ritual sacrifice. We'd go hiking after. Mom would quiz us on poetry while we climbed. She kept going, painting him a picture of a life filled with simple joys, of love and laughter." Harlan let her talk. Let her memories fill the space that pain wanted to consume. He sat silently, picturing that family in his mind, letting it ease the guilt that gnawed at his soul. He was the reason her life was in shambles. He was the reason she came back, and now it was his duty to make sure she lived. Then her questions turned, sharp and unexpected. "What about you? Have you ever felt like your life isn't entirely your own? Like you belong to other people more than yourself?" That one landed like a gut punch. Harlan shifted, one hand resting on the unstable rubble, the other clenched into a fist. "Yeah, a lot," Harlan admitted, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. "Some days you want the company of people and other days solitude." Matilda continued. It was more of a statement than a question. He exhaled, surprised at how right she was. "Again, let's just say, in my line of work, you carry people, their safety, their mistakes, their needs, and if something goes wrong, it's on you." "Sounds like a pack leader," Matilda whispered, the words echoing in the confined space. The words slipped so easily from her mouth that Harlan flinched. A cold dread washed over him, and his heart began to race. "You've been reading too many wilderness documentaries," Harlan said, trying to keep his voice light, careful. "Maybe. Or maybe you're not as good at hiding yourself as you think." Her words cut deeper than she knew, each syllable a tiny shard of ice against his skin. She paused, breath catching, and Harlan's worry increased. He needed to keep her mind off the pain, off the fear. "I've had these dreams since I was little. Weird, vivid things. Running barefoot through forests at night, feeling wind in my face, moonlight on my skin. No fear. Just freedom. Harlan stilled, every muscle in his body tensing. Sometimes there's a black wolf ahead of me, massive. I always follow it, never catches me, never loses me. A cold wind blew over the ravaged site and Harlan's skin prickled. His wolf stirred like a heartbeat under his skin, a primal recognition resonating within him. Weird, right? I've never told anyone that. Not even my ex. Maybe it's not weird at all. Maybe it means something, Harlan said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. Like what? Like, it's leading you somewhere. He was playing with fire, he knew, but he couldn't resist. Her innocence, her vulnerability, drew him in. There was a lull. The rain had stopped. For now. Then came the silence. Too long. Matilda? Harlan called, his voice sharp with rising tension. No answer. Matilda! The name tore out of him, panic snapping through his chest like a live wire. Still, nothing. The silence roared. It hit him hard and fast. She was fading. Panic rose like a tidal wave, crashing into his ribs, clawing at his throat. He surged forward instinctively, as if he could dig through the stone with his bare hands. Dominic was at his side in seconds, jaw tight, eyes scanning Harlan's face. She's lost a lot of blood, Dom said carefully, anchoring himself beside his alpha. She may have just passed out. Can you still hear her heartbeat? Harlan closed his eyes, straining, reaching past fear, past the noise to her. Matilda, he called again, voice breaking, raw, cracked with guilt, fear, and something deeper, something he didn't have a name for but felt in every cell of his being. Please talk to me. I need to hear your voice. Don't leave me. Dominic froze at that. There was more here than he'd realized. A lot more. Then, faintly, barely there, Harlan, her voice, slurred, strained, but his name. Don't leave me. His knees nearly gave out. I'm here, Matilda. I'm here. The words were a broken whisper, trembling with relief and something dangerously close to love. She barely breathed out the next words. I had the dream again. The forest. The wolf. His pulse jumped. Was it still ahead of you? He asked, heart hammering. A pause. No, she said. This time, it looked back at me. His throat clenched. He knew that wolf. Knew it. He was the wolf. I felt like it recognized me. She gave the softest chuckle, exhausted, frayed at the edges. Told you it was weird. It's not weird, Harlan said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. She didn't press, and he didn't explain. He stayed, hands still on the rubble, heart pounding like a war drum under his skin. She had seen him, the wolf. He had been the one from her childhood dreams. She knows, and he didn't know what to do. Evening painted the wreckage in bruised purples and muddy gold. The air felt heavy, thick with ozone and tension as more machinery groaned and creaked across the unstable terrain. The rescue site bustled with activity, but no one spoke louder than necessary. Everyone had learned by now that silence carried hope, noise carried collapse. Harlan stood at the edge of the access shaft, his body tense, breath shallow, locked in that unnatural stillness only wolves understood, right before the world turned. Dominic approached from behind. We're about to move the third support brace. Engineers say it'll shift everything. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Harlan didn't answer. He just stared into the hole like it might bite him back. Then it happened. A screech of steel, a guttural crack, and then the world sank. The earth groaned like a wounded beast, and without warning, collapsed. Concrete shifted. Rebar snapped like brittle bones, and a fresh wave of debris thundered down into the hole. Dust exploded outward like smoke from a cannon, swallowing the light and the air. A suffocating cloud choked the throat and stung the eyes, and silence. Harlan was already moving, shoving past engineers and pack alike, a primal roar building in his chest. Matilda! Matilda! Harlan's voice tore through the thick air, raw and desperate. Nothing. No sound, no breath. No heartbeat answered his frantic call. Only the grinding echo of settling debris and the terrifying, all-encompassing silence. He dropped to his knees, tearing at the rubble with bare hands. Jagged edges sliced his palms open, drawing blood that mingled with the ever-present dust. His claws punched through the skin unbidden, extending in desperate fury, tearing at the unyielding stone. His eyes lit like twin suns behind a storm, amber and wild, the wolf raging beneath the surface. "Back him up now! Camouflage!" Dominic shouted from behind, his voice sharp with command. Pack members moved fast, creating a wall of bodies and a distraction. Flashlights flicked, illuminating the controlled chaos. Tarps shifted, obscuring the unfolding drama. Radios flared with static, a purposeful cacophony designed to mask the truth. Just enough chaos, Dominic knew, to give their alpha room to come undone, safely. Harlan didn't care. He bled. He dug. He snarled under his breath, each second heavier than the last, each failed attempt fueling the inferno in his veins. The scent of concrete dust and blood filled his nostrils, a grim counterpoint to the faint, lingering sweetness he desperately sought. He felt her absence like a physical blow, sharp, brutal, impossible to ignore. A gaping void tore through him, raw and sudden. 11 minutes. 11 long, torturous minutes. That's how long it took. Just sheer hell. Where the world shrank to nothing but cold, unyielding stone beneath his bleeding hands and the crushing certainty that Matilda was gone. Then he heard it. A breath. Faint, ragged, but undeniably a breath. Then, Harlan? The voice, though weak, cut through the dust and despair like a beacon. He exhaled with a sound between a sob and a growl, the relief so intense it threatened to buckle his knees. I'm here, Matilda," Harlan said, his voice hoarse, thick with unshed tears. But something was off. He stilled, sniffed, his wolf senses sharpening, seeking confirmation, and there it was. The scent had changed. Her signature had always been unmistakable honeysuckle, rain, that haunting undercurrent of something old, something other. But now, there was heat, wildness, fur, something no human should carry. A primal musk that spoke of tooth and claw and the untamed wilderness within. Dominic stepped in behind him, eyes narrowing, his expression a mask of grim understanding. "You smell that?" Harlan nodded once, slowly, his mind reeling. From beneath the rubble, Matilda spoke, her voice trembling. "Something's wrong with me. I can hear too much. Every sound is sharp, like knives scraping against bone. It hurts. And the smells, God, Harlan, I can smell the dirt, I can smell you. I can smell everything." Harlan closed his eyes, a wave of understanding washing over him. This wasn't adrenaline. This was awakening. The dormant wolf within her, stirred by trauma, was now clawing its way to the surface. "I need you to breathe through it," Harlan said, his voice carefully controlled. "It's your senses expanding. It's okay?" "No, it's not okay." Matilda's voice rose in panic. "I feel like I'm coming apart." "You're not. You're becoming something more." Harlan's words were a promise and a plea, a desperate gamble in the face of the impossible. Deeper within the collapsed structure, Matilda lay trapped, disoriented, her world a swirling vortex of pain and confusion. The concrete pressed in on her, a suffocating weight that mirrored the terror gripping her heart. Disconnected images flashed through her mind, Harlan's face etched with worry, the cool spray of rain on her skin, the taste of honeysuckle on the breeze. But these memories were fraying at the edges, distorted by the encroaching darkness. Then came the whispers. Not audible voices, but impressions, feelings. The tremor of the earth, the skittering of insects beneath the rubble, the distant heartbeat of a rabbit in its burrow. The whispers grew louder, sharper, coalescing into a symphony of sensation that threatened to overwhelm her. It was too much, too sharp, too real. Just as consciousness began to slip away, something shifted within her. A spark ignited deep in her soul, and a new awareness began to bloom. The pain receded, replaced by a raw, untamed power. The whispers transformed into a chorus, revealing the intricate tapestry of life that surrounded her. She could feel the flow of energy, the pulse of the earth, the primal instincts that bound all living things together. And with that newfound awareness came a shift in her own body. Her senses, once limited, now extended beyond the confines of her skin. She could smell the fear clinging to the rescuers above, the anxiety radiating from Harlan himself. She could feel the vibrations of the machinery, the subtle shifts in the earth, the intricate network of cracks and fissures that trapped her. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. Even more so, it connected her to the man she loved. Later, away from prying eyes, Harlan stood with Dominic beneath the jagged shadow of a half-collapsed wall. The rain started again, steady and cold, as if the sky itself refused to offer even a moment of mercy. It was as if nature itself was eavesdropping. "That's not just stress," Dominic said, his voice low and grave. "That's genetic. She's changing." Harlan nodded, his gaze fixed on the wreckage. "There's wolf in her blood, dormant but awakening." Dominic shook his head, disbelieving. "That's impossible. There's no pack bloodline in this territory we don't know about. Silent Crest's history is clean." Harlan's eyes didn't waver. "Unless she's descended from the Lost Valley pack." Dominic went pale, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his concealed knife. "The ones from the old legends? The ones that vanished during the Purge Wars? Wiped out. Or so we thought," Harlan said, his voice a low growl. Dominic stared at him, voice dropping to a whisper. "They were supposed to be extinct, Harlan. 200 years ago. Gone. Buried. Not all of them, apparently," Harlan said, his gaze fixed on the flickering lights of the rescue site. He looked out toward the rescue site again, toward the voice calling his name softly, painfully from beneath the rubble. He knew he had to wait for her to be brought safe and out of the rubble, so he could see the woman whose scent had upended his soul up close again. Harlan gave Dominic a dark, determined look. "She has wolf in her blood. The Lost Valley pack never died." Harlan to himself, one of them lived and had a daughter. His voice was a low growl. Night wrapped the rescue site in shadow, a grim shroud stitched by floodlights and the ever-present hum of generators. The makeshift medical tent smelled of antiseptic and wet earth, but it was the scent of her fever-slick skin and old blood that had Harlan pacing like a caged predator. Matilda's fever had spiked. The tent felt stifling, the air thick with the cloying sweetness of decay and the metallic tang of her blood. She writhed on the gurney, wedged into the narrow shaft where medics could barely reach her, her voice slipping in and out of coherent speech like a ghost caught between worlds. A sheen of sweat plastered her dark hair to her forehead, a testament to the inferno raging within. The human doctor, a tired man with sweat staining his collar, leaned into Harlan with all the gravity of a death sentence. "If the infection spreads any further before we can get her out, I can't promise she'll make it," the doctor said, his voice hushed with weary resignation. "There's nothing else you can do?" Harlan asked, feeling the desperate edge creep into his voice. The doctor looked at him, measured, and was regretful. "We've done everything. IV fluids, antibiotics through a catheter, pain management, but she's crashing. 36 hours is the earliest we can move that debris without causing another collapse." 36 hours. Harlan's jaw clenched hard enough to pop. His wolf prowled beneath his skin, snarling at the timeline, at the frailty of human flesh, at the maddening helplessness of watching her fade. He felt the tremor of his impending shift, barely held back. He returned to her side. Matilda was burning up, cheeks flushed, a dangerous crimson, lips cracked and bleeding. She murmured nonsense between bursts of tremors. She was shaking with the force of her involuntary spasms. But not all of it was nonsense. "The trees bend for him," she whispered, her voice strained and ragged. "Wind doesn't touch him. He runs, and I run behind. On all fours now, my fur bristling with the thrill of the chase. I can't see the sky, only his fur. Black, like night. But I'm not afraid." Harlan froze, his blood running cold. That wasn't random fever dream gibberish. It was a memory, a fragment pulled from something primal and deep. Matilda, barely audible, continued. "He waits for me at the river's edge. There's a stone, round as a moon. We rest there. He watches the stars like he remembers something sad, something lost." Her fingers clenched by her side, her knuckles white. His breath caught, A strangled gasp. That place. That stone. That river. It was real. It was deep in the old territory, a spot known only to pack and touch by humans, unmapped by GPS. The air there hummed with potent magic, the echo of ancient rituals and unbroken bonds. Harlan whispered, quietly shaken, "How the hell does she know that?" He knelt beside her, heart racing. Her scent had changed again. Fever warped, yes, but laced now with that same strange resonance he hadn't smelled since he was a pup. The ancient blood, Lost Valley blood. The whisper of something ancient awakened within her, a power he barely dared to acknowledge. His mother used to sing to him when he had fevers like this. Not words he understood, not exactly. Just a hum. A lullaby from another life, back when their kind didn't have to hide, back when they ran free beneath the moon. A lullaby of power. He couldn't reach her, not close enough to touch. The gap felt endless, but that didn't stop him. He dropped to his knees beside the rubble, hands empty, but his voice filled the space. From deep in his chest came a low, guttural song like smoke, drifting up from embers no one had dared to tend. Harlan sang softly in the old tongue. Nalen, Nalen, Thor Imara. Winds may howl, but I will guard you. Run through shadows, run through stars, the pack is with you, near or far. The sound was rough, untrained, but imbued with an ancient power. A resonance that vibrated through the tent. Matilda stilled, her breath slowed, becoming deep and even. The twitching ceased entirely. The fever, once burning like a wildfire, eased as if the storm inside her was listening, bowing to the ancient voice that had called it. Her face became more relaxed than he'd seen it in days. Standing in the shadows and watching as Harlan sang directly to Matilda, Dominic muttered, "I'll be damned." Harlan didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too busy trying to explain the impossible feeling rising in his chest. The lullaby felt like a key, unlocking something within her, within him. An hour later, Harlan sat on the rubble, wet from rain and weighed down by everything he hadn't yet said. The hum of machinery was distant now, muffled by exhaustion and awe. The air around them seemed to shimmer with an unnatural stillness. Then her hand twitched. Matilda's voice was groggy but clear as she spoke. "I know that song." Harlan's head snapped toward her, his pulse leaping. "That's not possible. No one outside my family's ever heard it," Harlan said, incredulous. She opened her eyes, barely slits, but focused. "Sure. In my dream, the black wolf sang it to me," Matilda said, her eyes unfocused. Silence fell like a blade, sharp and absolute. Harlan couldn't breathe for a second. His wolf stirred, no longer agitated but reverent. He had sung that lullaby only once before, to the alpha before him. He swallowed, his throat suddenly tight. "Matilda, that song's never been written down. It's passed down orally, alpha to alpha. It's sacred." She didn't need to see him to feel the truth between them. A faint smile touched her voice. "I know, but I still feel like it's mine too." The implications cracked through Harlan like a lightning strike, searing his very soul. This connection, it wasn't new. It was old, a resonance echoing across generations. It was older than the storm, older than Silent Crest, older than either of them understood. It was in the blood, a shared lineage, a forgotten pact rekindled by a fever dream and an ancient lullaby. He wondered just how ancient that lineage was. Dawn broke over Silent Crest in a sullen gray hush, the sky smeared with smoke and storm haze. The air clung thick with unease, part rain, part raw, anticipation as the third day of the rescue began. Harlan stood where he always did, near the mouth of the shaft that led down into the crushed skeleton of the Jensen home. His boots sank slightly in the churned mud. His coat was soaked through. His mind, a battlefield. Matilda's condition had stabilized, just barely. The fever had ebbed, leaving behind a weak but lucid voice, echoing up through the rubble. "I know when you're near," Matilda murmured, her voice a fragile thread pulled from the darkness below. "Even before you speak, I know." Harlan stiffened, every muscle in his body locking tight. Her voice wasn't questioning. It was knowing, a statement of fact that resonated with something unsettlingly familiar deep within him. And I can feel you moving, she continued, her voice gaining a touch of strength. Like pressure in my chest shifts with every step you take. That's not normal, right? He hesitated, staring into the inky blackness of the pit as if he could see her lying there, broken but somehow unbroken. Harlan finally broke the silence with a low, gravelly tone. No, it's not. She exhaled, a sound equal parts relief and fear, a fragile acknowledgement of the chasm that was opening between the world she knew and the reality that was about to be revealed. Matilda's voice dropped, trembling, but steady enough to cut through the air. Tell me the truth, Harlan. What aren't you saying? There it was. No more dancing around the edge of it. No more metaphors and lullabies. The time for gentle deception was over. His hands curled into fists, the knuckles white beneath the grime. He could lie. Keep her safe in ignorance until they could get her out. Wrap her in comforting words and falsehoods like gauze, protecting her from the harsh realities of their world. But her next words stopped him, ripping through his resolve like a blade. I keep having these dreams, Matilda confided, her voice barely a whisper. They feel like memories, but they can't be mine. Places I've never seen, people I've never met, but I know them. I feel them. Something's waking up inside me, and I need to know what it is. Her words hit him like a physical blow, a surge of power emanating from the earth beneath his feet. It was a truth sharp enough to demand its own in return, a plea he couldn't ignore. So Harlan sat down by the edge of the rubble, leaned close to where he knew she lay trapped beneath the cracked earth and fractured beams, and bled it out. He'd been carrying this burden for too long, and Matilda's strength gave him the courage to finally put it down. Harlan's voice shook slightly as he said, Your parents, they didn't make it. A long pause followed, stretching into an eternity that felt heavier than the tons of debris separating them. Long enough for the wind to rise and fall in a mournful sigh, for the buzz of rescue tools to fade to a distant, insignificant hum. Then, a sound, soft, shattered, not quite a sob. Not yet a scream, just the breath of a world falling inward, collapsing under the weight of unbearable loss. Matilda asked quietly, All of them? Harlan nodded, then remembered she couldn't see it. The gesture was for himself, a final acknowledgement of the tragedy. Harlan replied, Yes. The grief that rose from below the rubble was tangible. It crawled through the air like smoke from a funeral pyre, choking the life out of the already oppressive atmosphere. Her scent twisted, honeysuckle gone to ash, rain turning to salt, a potent cocktail of sorrow and despair. He pressed his palm to the broken stone, feeling the cold bite of the rock against his skin. Not to soothe her, he knew that no words or actions could truly ease the pain of such a profound loss. He was there to anchor himself, a steadfast presence in the face of the storm raging beneath them. She cried for hours, the sound echoing through the ruins, a symphony of heartbreak that echoed the collective loss of the entire town. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stayed, a silent sentinel over her grief, letting the earth carry his presence to her like a heartbeat echoing through stone. And then, quietly, something changed. Beneath the overwhelming scent of loss, something else began to bloom. Power, old and strange, faint but unmistakable. It pulsed through the earth, a subtle vibration that resonated deep within his bones. He didn't imagine it. Dominic smelled it too, across the site, his work momentarily abandoned as his nostrils flared, testing the air. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in the air, silently agreeing she was becoming something else. Evening neared, casting long, distorted shadows across the ravaged landscape. The air thickened with heat despite the cloud cover, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from the ruins. Then, her voice again, hoarse, hollow, but undeniably there. Matilda whispered, I feel like I'm changing. Something inside me is different. Harlan closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. His wolf pressed against the inside of his skin like a tide at the edge of a dam, desperate to break free. Harlan's voice laced with a hint of anticipation. What if I told you there are things in this world most people don't know about? The silence was loaded, questions, realizations, and something far older humming beneath the surface. Without missing a beat, Matilda said dryly, "I'd say explaining why I can sense your heartbeat through tons of concrete would be a good start." Harlan laughed, a short, stunned, real laugh. The sound surprised even him. It tasted like surrender, the lifting of a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for so long. He leaned closer to the rubble, lowering his voice until it was almost a growl. "A promise," whispered into the gathering darkness. Harlan declared, "Then hold on, Matilda, because I think your world's about to get a lot bigger." Afternoon heat sweltered heavy over Silent Crest, clinging to the skin and making tempers run thin. A storm held barely in check was how Harlan appeared, his eyes shadowed and his voice grim. Dominic and the Elder Pack members had gathered in the tent just outside the rescue perimeter, their faces carved from concern and disbelief. "She's not just a survivor. She's not just human. She's my mate," Harlan stated, his voice resonating with conviction. The silence that followed thrummed with unspoken doubts. Elder Rion, the oldest of them, leaned forward on his cane, bushy eyebrows lifting. "Are you certain, Alpha?" he inquired, his voice betraying a hint of trepidation. "Every sense in me screams it. My wolf, he's already chosen. I feel her in my blood, in my bones," Harlan replied, the urgency palpable in his tone. Keeper of the old rites, Greta, voiced her skepticism. "A human? It's unheard of. She's not entirely human," Harlan insisted. "I'm telling you, there's wolf in her, dormant, buried, but real. Her scent is shifting. Her senses are changing." Ryan narrowed his gaze, his mind wrestling with the implications. "Then it's possible," he conceded, albeit reluctantly. The old stories. There were cases, rare, where trauma, near death, even love, triggered dormant bloodlines, especially from the Lost Valley. Dominic folded his arms, his posture tense. "What are you thinking, Harlan?" "Her oxygen is dropping," Harlan said, his voice tight with desperation. "The doctor says she has hours at most before we start losing her, permanently. I want to try bonding, fully, soul deep." A ripple of murmurs swept through the tent. Greta paled, her eyes wide with alarm. "If she's not ready, if her body can't hold it, it could tear her apart. And if I don't try, she'll die anyway." Harlan countered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Back at the pit, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Monitors were glitching. The medical team had resorted to shouting into the shaft, hoping for signs of lucidity. "Pulse is slowing. Blood oxygen tanks almost empty. We're running out of time," one of the rescue medics shouted down the hole. Without hesitation, Harlan dropped to his knees near the opening, placed his hand on the stone, and called out, the edge of desperation cracking his voice. "Matilda, can you hear me?" A faint response came back, slurred but undeniably there. "Course I can. You're always so loud." A flicker of a smile played on his lips, quickly overshadowed by the grim reality. "I need to ask you something. Something strange. I want to try something that might help, but it's risky. I need your trust." A pause hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. Then, barely a whisper, "I already gave that to you." Her words struck him deep, resonating with a vulnerability that pierced his shields. "I want to create a bond, a connection between us. It's hard to explain, but it could save you." "Is that why I feel like I know your heartbeat better than my own?" Matilda asked, her voice laced with confusion and a hint of burgeoning hope. His eyes closed, and he drew a shaky breath. Maybe it's always been there, just waiting for the right moment." He rose to his feet, shedding his coat. The pack gathered in a circle behind him, silent and reverent. Elder Ryan stepped forward, handing Harlan a ceremonial blade carved from obsidian and bone. "Speak the words. Focus on everything. Give her what she needs most. Not your strength, Harlan, your truth." The ritual was ancient, rare, and sacred. Harlan knelt, palm pressed hard to the earth, voice low and rough like gravel soaked in lightning as he spoke the old tongue. The air thickened, time itself seeming to pause and listen. Then came the answer, a pulse beneath his palm, a heartbeat not his own, weak but real. His wolf surged, connecting through the fragile thread. He felt her, Matilda, gasping beneath the rubble. And then, for the first time, they both saw not with eyes, but through each other. He stood under open skies, sweat and dirt clinging to his skin. She lay buried beneath tons of wreckage, yet suddenly saw the world through his eyes. I see trees, blue sky. You! Her voice was breathless, trembling with wonder. Meeting you like this, it's beautiful. If I die here, I'll carry your face with me. Always. Harlan's breath caught. His heart slammed against his ribs with a fierce, possessive tenderness. You are part of me now, Matilda, and I of you. I swear no matter what comes, keep fighting, I've got you now. Don't let go. His voice was raw, stripped bare of all but the truth burning in his soul. The wind shifted, carrying her scent, still tinged with blood and rain, but now infused with something else. She was his, fully. The night was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of a world on the edge of change. The rescue site had become a buzz of activity, a frantic orchestra of humanity struggling to pierce the silence of Matilda's prison. Harlan stood at the edge of the clearing, the bond between them alive, a humming thread that connected his every heartbeat to hers. He could feel her, a wild confusion twisting inside her, a mix of panic, fear, and something deeper. It felt like the storm had followed them, dark and swirling in her mind. Matilda wasn't just trapped in the rubble anymore. She was trapped inside herself, her senses newly attuned to the world in ways that felt too much to bear. The bond initiated by Harlan was changing her faster than either of them could have anticipated. The transformation was beginning. Through their connection, Harlan could hear the chaos inside her, thoughts the overwhelming barrage of sights, sounds, and smells assaulting her. His wolf growled, restless, responding to her distress. Focus on me. I'm here. Just breathe, Harlan whispered through the bond. But even as he tried to soothe her, her anxiety spiraled. The darkness of the debris, once so quiet and isolating, now felt alive, oppressive. Matilda's breath quickened, shallow and sharp. Harlan felt her pulse racing beneath his palm, his every nerve on fire from their bond. It's too much. I can't. Matilda's voice echoed through their shared consciousness, tight with panic. You're stronger than you know. Breathe with me. Trust me. I've got you. Harlan's mental voice was steady, calm, a bedrock in the storm raging within her. In the space between their bodies, the energy crackled. It wasn't just their words now, it was the weight of what they shared, what he was teaching her, the wolf, the pack, the power that surged beneath their skin. Through the bond, Harlan sent her the steadiness he knew she needed, like a rope pulled taut between them, unbreakable. Then, a sound. The low rumble of the rescue team's heavy machinery started to push closer, and the men and women working to clear the final bits of rubble. The moment of reckoning was close. His senses stretched out, as if he could feel every movement, every breath they took. But his focus never left her. The engineers had cleared the way. They had painstakingly widened a small but vital opening in the debris, enough space for a touch, enough space for their fingers to meet. Harlan leaned down, fingers brushing against the edges of the rubble. His breath caught in his chest as his hand reached for her. Then, it happened. His fingertips barely touched hers through the gap in the rock and dirt, and the world shifted. The jolt of electricity was instantaneous. The spark flared in the darkness like lightning striking the ground. It was not just physical. It was the raw, untamed force of their souls recognizing each other. It was their bond snapping into place with the force of a storm. Matilda gasped, her breath catching in the space between them. What was that? Matilda's voice, though still close in his mind, trembled with a newfound awe. Harlan swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. It's us. That's what happens when two souls connect. When we bond, we become more than what we were before. We're joined. Harlan's voice was low, raw, with the intensity of their connection. Her scent reached him then, No longer the simple trace of a human. Now, it was something altogether different, a fusion of wildness and grace. Her body had responded, the primal wolf inside her awakening with full force. It wasn't just the change that shook him, it was the undeniable truth of it. Her senses exploded. The metallic tang of the machinery, the damp earth clinging to the rubble, the antiseptic scent of the medics, each sensation slammed into her with an unbearable intensity. The sounds were deafening, the scrape of metal, the murmur of voices, the frantic beat of her own heart. It was a symphony of chaos, each note a discordant screech against her raw nerves. Matilda squeezed her eyes shut, desperate to shut out the onslaught. Each breath felt like fire in her lungs. Confusion reigned, a swirling vortex of questions without answers. What was happening to her? Was she dying? Where was she going? Terror gripped her, a cold vice squeezing the air from her lungs. The scent of the earth intensified, morphing into something deeper, wilder. Her musk mingled with it, an animalistic fragrance she'd never possessed before. It was a heady perfume of earth and rain, musk and power, something ancient, something untouched. It was a raw elemental force, and it made him want to claim her, make her his in every possible way. But Harlan pushed the primal urge aside. There was no time to dwell. The rescue team was almost there. He focused on Matilda. His calming presence, a lighthouse cutting through the fog in her mind, guided her. It was a feeling of safety, a promise of protection, a reassurance that she wasn't alone. The change, it's happening now. Your body is preparing. Harlan's voice was soft against her racing thoughts. He paused, searching for the right words, but he didn't need them. She knew. She felt it. The knowledge washed over her, a mixture of disbelief and a strange, exhilarating acceptance. Disbelief, because how could this be real? How could she, Matilda, an ordinary woman, be turning into something else? Acceptance followed, a slow, creeping understanding that this was her path, her destiny. Deeper than any fear, she felt right. I can feel it. It's terrifying, but it's also right, isn't it? Matilda's voice was breathless, caught between fear and wonder. Harlan nodded, the weight of truth pressing against his chest. Yes, it's right. It's you. The tension thickened as the team cleared the last of the debris. The cool night air hit them both as the final opening was made, enough for the medics to start the delicate work of pulling her free. But even as the team began their work, Harlan's fingers never left hers. That electric connection between them was a lifeline. When I come out of here, everything changes, doesn't it? Matilda's eyes were still closed, her voice soft, barely a whisper. Harlan didn't hesitate. Yes, but not all change is loss. Some of it is finding what you were always meant to be. He wanted her to know that loss would be a part of what they chose. How could it not be? But love, real love, could bring forth a joy worth fighting for. He would teach her to be strong. She turned her head slightly, trying to make sense of it all, of the shift that was happening in her. There was still fear in her eyes, but beneath it acceptance. She could feel what was coming, just as he had. She could feel the animal's heart beating in time with her own. And what am I meant to be? To you? Her voice, quiet but certain, seemed to pierce through him, and the answer was simple. Harlan's voice was low, filled with something he hadn't realized he was holding back. Everything. The air crackled with anticipation, but Harlan, his jaw tight, refused to succumb to its crushing weight. Not yet. Dawn painted the ruins in hues of pale gold, a fragile promise after the long night. The sun, like a hesitant explorer, peeked over the horizon, its light a stark reminder of the world beyond Matilda's tomb. The final, agonizing push was underway. The massive machinery groaned and whined in protest, each protesting screech tearing at Harlan's nerves. Every inch of progress felt like an eternity drawn out, a cruel joke played by the universe. He stood like a sentinel, his eyes never leaving the point of breakthrough, as though he could physically will the stone to crumble faster. His focus was laser sharp, a single-minded determination that blotted out everything else. Stay with me. Harlan sent the message through the bond, his voice a low, steady anchor in the storm of her fear. Just a little longer. You're almost there. I won't let you slip. Matilda's pulse thrummed against his own, a frantic drumbeat mirroring the chaos within the ruins. He felt her terror, a raw, untamed thing that clawed at his composure as she realized freedom was at hand. A part of her, he knew, was terrified of the unknown, of leaving behind the only reality she had ever known, the memories, both painful and precious, of her family. But beneath the fear, there was something else, too, an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that resonated with his very soul. Her voice, fragile yet surprisingly strong, trembled in his mind. I don't know if I can face a world without them, without my family, but I can feel you. You are real. You've been here with me the whole time, and that's what I'm holding on to. The screech of metal against stone intensified, the shattering sounds echoing through the ruins. Workers, sweat beading on their brows, tore away the final barriers, their faces grim with concentration. The space was claustrophobic, the darkness absolute, a reflection of Matilda's internal prison. Her mind, her senses, her past had been her jailers, and now she was on the cusp of release. The final slab of concrete shifted with a groan that sounded like the earth itself weeping. It was a sound that resonated deep within the bones, a primal lament for what was lost and broken. The air was too thick to breathe, a suffocating blanket of pulverized stone and despair. Dust rose like a malevolent spirit, curling in the golden light that slanted cruelly across the ruin, turning the debris into a macabre stage. A hush, thick and heavy, fell over the rescue team, eyes bloodshot, raw with fatigue, limbs trembling from the brutal effort and gnawing exhaustion. Years of training, honed instincts, all rendered useless against the sheer weight of the tragedy. No one moved, each individual lost in their private hell of helplessness. Except Harlan. He stood at the pit's edge, a stark silhouette against the dawn-tinged sky, his breath rattling in his chest like pebbles in a tin can. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, a compressed spring ready to unleash. His heart, that ancient drum, knew. His wolf, the primal instinct that coursed through his veins, knew. This was it. He didn't wait for permission, for protocol, for the cautious whispers of doubt that would inevitably follow. The moment demanded action, not deliberation. "Back off," he barked, the single phrase laced with a ferocity that brooked no argument. The team parted instantly, a silent, unquestioning surrender to something larger than themselves, something wild and untamed within Harlan. Harlan dropped to his knees and dove in, a reckless plunge into the mouth of the earth. He crawled through the narrow, treacherous tunnel, ignoring the raw tear of stone against his skin, the stinging protest of his abused muscles. Every inch closer fueled the heat, the bond burning hotter, a psychic tether pulling him relentlessly forward. She was right there, just beyond reach, an unbearable torment of proximity and impossibility. Then he saw her, a tangle of hair, the color of spun moonlight dulled by grime and despair, a pale face, once radiant, now stained with grime and blood, a canvas of suffering. And beneath the weight of a jagged slab of concrete, her legs pinned, crushed. The sight froze his breath in his throat, a vice clamping down on his lungs. The image seared itself into his memory, a brand he would carry for eternity. She was alive, barely, a flicker of life in the face of oblivion. "Matilda," he breathed, a prayer whispered on the wind, too afraid to speak louder, to shatter the fragile thread that still connected them. A soft sound came back, a ragged gasp, a desperate plea for air. But then, the moment the final piece of concrete was hoisted clear by the winch above, the oppressive weight lifted, freedom granted, and she screamed. A sound ripped from her throat that didn't sound human. It was pain distilled to its purest form, the concentrated agony of days without water, without food, without hope. Agony from days of unrelenting pressure, blood-starved limbs suddenly finding space to swell, to protest the return of life with a symphony of torment. The scream echoed up through the ruins, silencing the tentative chirping of birds, startling grown men into abject stillness. It was the sound of a soul breaking. Then, silence. Her body went slack, the tension draining away like water. Her eyes rolled back, revealing the whites, a terrifying blankness. No, no! No, no! Harlan was already moving, his actions driven by pure instinct, a desperate race against the encroaching darkness. He scrambled forward, hands under her shoulders, her back, pulling her free from the cold, dusty grave of rubble. She was limp, her face gray as ash, her skin like ice to the touch. Her lips were parted, whispering fragmented nonsense even in unconsciousness, a litany of fear and pain. He lifted her in his arms like she weighed nothing, a fragile doll broken beyond repair. His wolf surged up, a maelstrom of frantic energy, howling inside him with a grief so profound it threatened to tear him apart. She wasn't breathing right. Her chest rose in shallow, erratic pulls, each breath a struggle. He ran, the weight of her life in his hands, ran. Past the shell-shocked rescue team, their faces pale and drawn, their expressions a mixture of relief and horror. Past the scattered debris, the broken remnants of a world lost. His boots hit the ground in a pounding rhythm, a primal drumbeat against the encroaching silence, a desperate plea to the gods as he crossed the threshold of ruin into the dawn, a symbol of hope bleeding into the desolation. The ambulance doors flew open, revealing the sterile gleam of medical equipment, a promise of salvation. "She's crashing!" someone shouted, their voice edged with panic, but Harlan didn't stop moving. He climbed into the rig, still holding her, refusing to relinquish his hold, his grip a lifeline against the abyss. Paramedics reached for her, professional hands eager to take over, but his growl, low and guttural, froze them in their tracks. "I've got her," he snapped, the possessive pronoun a warning, a declaration of ownership that stemmed from something far deeper than logic or reason. They didn't argue, sensing the raw power, the untamed wildness that radiated from him. They understood that this was more than just a rescue. It was a primal connection, a desperate fight for survival. One medic moved to hook up the IV, a delicate needle piercing her ravaged flesh. Another worked on her legs, murmured something about crushed tissue, internal bleeding, a pulse that was fading too fast, a grim litany of injuries. Harlan sat with her in his lap, cradling her like something sacred, a precious artifact rescued from the flames. His lips brushed her temple, a silent prayer of protection. "I'm here," he whispered over and over again, a soothing mantra against the chaos of her broken body. "I've got you. Just breathe. Stay with me." She didn't answer, lost in the labyrinth of her pain, her head lolled against his shoulder, her cheek cold against his skin. Her blood smeared across his shirt, a crimson stain that spoke of sacrifice and survival, but in the storm of sirens and adrenaline, he saw it. Just for a split second, her eyelids fluttered, a fragile butterfly struggling to break free from his chrysalis. And beneath them, those eyes were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Not brown, not hazel. Something older, elemental. A molten blend of opal and gold, sunfire and shadow, flickering with a light not of this world, a spark of something ancient and powerful. They locked on him, and his wolf, his soul howled with recognition. His mate, his world. The missing piece he hadn't known existed until this very moment. A single tear, born of relief, of terror, of an overwhelming tide of emotion, slipped down Harlan's face as the ambulance tore away from Silent Crest, racing through the ghost town now bathed in the pale, hopeful light of the rising sunlight. He held her closer, kissed her forehead, and whispered into her hair, a promise whispered on the wind. "You're safe now, Matilda. And you're not alone." The world swam back into focus, a fractured mosaic of sensations. A rhythmic beeping, insistent and clinical, pulsed in her ears. A mechanical hiss, the exhalation of some unseen machine, punctuated the silence. The sterile scent of antiseptic, sharp and clean, filled her nostrils. Beneath her, the mattress offered a deceptive softness, a stark contrast to the searing agony that ripped through her legs. It felt like white-hot lightning, a relentless, agonizing fire. And then there was a voice, low, rough around the edges, a rumble that resonated deep within her. It whispered, a sound like thunder wrapped in velvet, both powerful and comforting. I'm right here. Matilda's eyes twitched beneath the heavy weight of her eyelids, struggling to obey her will. The effort was monumental. Harlan, she murmured, her lips barely parting to release the name, a fragile breath on the air. I'm here, he said again, closer now, his voice fracturing with emotion, a raw, untamed sound that vibrated through her. You're safe. I've got you. She tried to swim towards the sound, his voice a beacon in the swirling darkness, but her body felt impossibly heavy, leaden, and unresponsive. She drifted, suspended somewhere between excruciating pain and blinding light, between oppressive darkness and the faint, persistent thread of their bond. But his voice, that constant, unwavering presence, tethered her to reality, anchoring her to the present. Something warm, solid, and undeniably real cupped her hand, enveloping it in a comforting embrace. His hand, a jolt, a spark of recognition, shot through her. Her fingers twitched, responding instinctively to his touch, a silent plea for connection. Then, slowly, agonizingly, her eyelashes fluttered open, fighting against the glue of exhaustion that held them shut. It was a Herculean effort. The hospital light, filtered through some unseen diffuser, cast a muted glow, painting the sterile white walls with strokes of gold and blue. Machines blinked and whirred beside her, their rhythmic pulses a constant reminder of her precarious state. And then there he was, at her bedside, looming over her, a figure sculpted from worry and relief. Harlan, not just the echo of his presence in her mind, the feeling of his hand in hers, the real him, flesh and blood, standing before her. And for a second, the sheer force of his presence stole her breath away. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but somehow stronger, battle-hardened, forged in the crucible of fear and desperation. Stubble shadowed his jaw, a testament to sleepless nights and relentless pursuit. Dirt still clung to the edges of his skin, ingrained in the creases of his hands, as if he'd fought time itself, wrestled with the very fabric of reality to reach her. His eyes, storm-dark, turbulent, and filled with an intensity that bordered on feral, locked on hers with a desperate hunger, as if they were the only two people left in the world, clinging to each other in the vast emptiness. Matilda gasped, the sudden intake of air sharp and painful in her chest. A sob broke loose from her chest, unbidden and raw, a sound that came from someplace deeper than pain. "You're here," she breathed, eyes wide with disbelief, shimmering with tears. "My wolf." Harlan's entire body stilled, his breath hitching like he'd been struck. "Yeah," he whispered, voice thick, trembling. "I'm here." He leaned closer, as if closing the distance between them could stitch together everything that had broken. With shaking fingers, he brushed a strand of dust-matted hair from her forehead, his touch so gentle it almost broke her. "And so are you," he said, eyes locked to hers, voice unraveling into a whisper. "You came back to me, Matilda. You fought your way through hell, and you came home. I saw you," she said, her voice fragile, teetering on the edge of breaking. "Through your eyes. I felt you. But it wasn't enough. I needed to see you like this. With mine." Tears streamed down her temples, tracing wet paths across her skin. But she didn't care. The indignity of weakness was insignificant compared to the miracle of his presence. "I thought I'd died down there," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper against the sterile air. "And the only thing I was afraid of was not getting to see your face, even once." He broke. The rigid control he had maintained, the stoic facade he had presented to the world, shattered. His head bowed, his shoulders shaking silently with the force of his suppressed emotion. His hand, still clasped tightly around hers, held it as if it were the last living thing on earth. a lifeline in the vast ocean of despair. When he lifted his face again, the tears were there, glistening in the harsh hospital light, and clean, unashamed, earned. They were tears of relief, of terror, of a love so profound it threatened to consume him. "You're the strongest damn thing I've ever seen," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You held on. You didn't let go." "I heard you," she said, trying to force a smile through the tears that continued to flow. "That voice of yours, it pulled me back, like a rope, a lifeline. I would have torn the world apart to get to you," Harlan murmured, his voice raw with a desperate intensity. "You have no idea the lengths I would have gone to." Then, gently, with a hesitant tenderness that belied his rugged exterior, he leaned in, his forehead pressed against hers, a silent communion, a sharing of pain and relief, and everything stilled. The world outside, with its beeping machines and sterile smells, faded into insignificance. This wasn't just a kiss. It was more, a claiming of space, of belonging, a reaffirmation of their intertwined destinies. A moment carved out of time, existing solely for them, a sanctuary built on the foundations of love and resilience. "I love you, Harlan," Matilda whispered, the words flowing so naturally, so effortlessly, that it was as if they'd always lived inside her, waiting for the moment to be released. "I don't even know how. I just do." His eyes closed, his face contorting with a mixture of relief and disbelief, like her words had cracked something wide open inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, unsteady, but true. "I didn't know how much I needed to hear that," he murmured. "I've been holding on to you without even knowing if I had the right to. But I never stopped." Not for a second. A sob escaped her, sharp and sudden. She reached for him, her hand trembling as it brushed his jaw, her fingers tracing the line of his cheek like she needed proof he was real. "I was never lost," she said, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper carried on the air. "I was just waiting to be found." Harlan kissed her hand, his lips lingering on her skin, a silent promise of protection and devotion. He pressed it to his heart, holding it there as if it were the key to his very existence. "Well," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "you're found now." The machines hummed quietly, their rhythmic beeping a subtle counterpoint to the profound intimacy unfolding between them. Outside the window, the sun dipped low, spilling amber and crimson across the sky, an ending and a beginning wrapped in the same breath. Inside the room, the wolf and his mate sat quietly, finally together. No more longing, no more silence, just a steady rhythm of shared breath, fingers entwined like they'd never let go again. Their bond, tested by fire and loss, now burned steady, unbreakable, undeniable. There was a quiet knock at the door, a subtle interruption that felt both intrusive and deeply comforting. Harlan glanced over his shoulder, his expression shifting from vulnerable to guarded in a split second. The door eased open, revealing a silent tableau. Dominic entered first, tall and lean, his presence a study in contained energy. His dark eyes immediately found Harlan's, a silent communication passing between them before they drifted to her, assessing, almost reverent. Behind him came Reese, a mountain of muscle subdued in the quiet atmosphere, and Marcus, familiar only from the voices she remembered hearing faintly through the rubble, his sharp eyes betraying a weariness that mirrored Harlan's. And then, an older man, graceful in movement despite his age, his presence was like old oak and steady wind, Elder Ryan. They stood just inside the room, a respectful distance maintained, not pushing forward, but present with a palpable sense of purpose. There was something reverent in the way they looked at her, respect, warmth, and an unexpected undercurrent of pride, a complex emotion that made her feel both humbled and utterly exposed. "Alpha," Dom said, nodding his head in acknowledgement to Harlan before turning his attention back to her. A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "We had to meet Matilda ourselves." Reese gave a half smile, his usually stoic face softened with relief. "We've been waiting for this moment for a few days." His gruff voice revealed a surprising amount of tenderness. Marcus chuckled under his breath, a low rumble of amusement, but there was a softness to his expression, a hint of vulnerability hidden beneath his usual sharp gaze. "We're just glad you're alive." Matilda struggled to sit up slightly, wincing at the sharp stab of pain in her legs. Harlan was instantly at her side, his strong arm a steadying presence, his hand gentle as he helped her adjust. "You don't have to say anything," Dom added quickly, sensing her discomfort. "But we wanted you to know we're here." Matilda glanced between them, overwhelmed by the intensity of their attention, the weight of their unspoken expectations. "I don't understand. Why me?" Elder Ryan stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice calm and strong, resonating with an ancient wisdom that seemed to fill the room. "Because you're not just a survivor, child. You are something more." Dom smiled gently, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Harlan is our alpha. And you," Reese said with a direct nod, his gaze unwavering, "are our Luna." Matilda's breath caught in her throat, her heart stuttering in her chest. She looked from Reese to Harlan, then back at them again, her mind reeling. "Luna? What does that even mean?" Dom stepped closer, his voice firm but kind, reassuring in its certainty. "It means you're his match, his equal. The soul was bonded to lead with him. We felt your strength already, through what you endured. And now that you're awake, we wanted to show you that you're not alone anymore." "You all stayed," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, blurring her vision. "Even when I couldn't talk, when everything felt hopeless, you all stayed. You didn't walk away. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." "Of course we stayed," Dom said, his voice steady but soft. "We were following Harlan. He never let go of you, so neither did we." Matilda looked at each of them, taking in their expressions, their unwavering support, her heart swelling with an emotion so intense it was hard to contain. Her voice shook with the force of it. "Thank you for believing." Elder Rion approached the bed and placed a warm, steady hand over hers, his touch grounding, comforting. "There's a place for you, Matilda, in our pack, in our hearts, and in our future." She looked at Harlan, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality, the weight of the responsibility they were offering. "This is a lot." He nodded, his eyes locking onto hers, conveying a depth of emotion that words couldn't capture. "And it's all yours, if you want it." She gave a trembling laugh, a sound that was half disbelief, half something deeper, relief perhaps, and a fragile tendril of hope. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Harlan said, his voice low and raw, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know your strength. I know your heart. And I know your mind." Matilda's smile faltered, the tears finally overflowing and trailing down her cheeks like shimmering rivers as her carefully constructed walls crumbled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. "When I lost my family, I thought I died too. Or at least, I wanted to. It was like, if they were gone, what was the point of staying? I didn't want to be the one left behind." The room stilled around her. The silence, not empty and oppressive, but full of reverence, of shared grief, and profound understanding. The unspoken acknowledgement of the darkness she had faced, the pain she had endured. "But now," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, raw with vulnerability, "I feel like I found them again. In all of you. In this pack. You made me feel like I still belong to something. Like I'm not alone." Dom's smile softened. Pride and sorrow mingled in his expression, reflecting the complex emotions swirling within them all. "You're not. Not ever again." She turned her gaze to each of them, Reese, his stoic face softened with empathy. Marcus, his sharp eyes filled with unexpected tenderness. Elder Ryan, his presence radiating wisdom and strength. And finally back to Harlan, the anchor that had pulled her back from the brink. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The way they looked at her said it all. Acceptance, belonging, love, home. She breathed again, but this time it wasn't a question, a hesitant plea. It was the truth, a dawning realization that resonated deep within her soul. "Yes, Luna," Dom said, his voice sure, unwavering. Home. The pack stepped back to give her space, allowing her to breathe, to process the enormity of what was happening. But the room remained warm, anchored by their presence, by their acceptance. She was no longer drifting through the ruins of what she'd lost, no longer clinging to the wreckage of her former life. She had survived the unthinkable. She had faced the darkness and clawed her way back to the light. And when she'd emerged, battered and broken but undeniably alive, he had been waiting. They had been waiting. Harlan sat beside her again, his presence a solid, comforting weight. He brushed a stray curl from her face, his touch gentle, possessive. "I missed you before I even met you," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur that sent shivers down her spine. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, she saw her reflection, strong, resilient, and filled with a love that transcended time and circumstance. "Don't ever let me go, my wolf. Not in this life," he whispered back, his gaze intense, unwavering, "and not in the next. That's the end of this tale. But in the world of the supernatural, there's always another shadow waiting. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, turn, and heartbeat. If you enjoyed the ride, there's more waiting for you. Just check out the other audiobooks on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more magic, monsters, and stories that go bump in the night. Until next time, I'll stay curious and brave and never stop listening.